to the University of Brasília. We are very proud that you could make it and give this very interesting seminar to us. And this presentation was organized by Jaqueline, which is in this session here. And I'm just here to say thank you very much and to follow the presentation. But the presentation will be guided by Jaqueline Gil, that will also do the introduction. Jaqueline?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much, Professor José Márcio, for allowing us to bring this discussion into the internationalization program of the Business School of the Administration Department. I'm very happy to be inviting one of my very good friends and a profession that I admire very much. So thanks so much, Gregory. And he is actually talking to us from Germany. So it's Guten Morgen, the language of the moment. I will quickly introduce Greg, and then of course we will invite him to talk to us. And I would like to encourage all of you to have your questions ready, both in Portuguese or in English. English is better, but you are also allowed to bring it in Portuguese, and Professor Siegrid, Professor José Márcio, and I are very happy to translate and share that to Greg, so he can, of course, share more and more regarding your own questions, all right? So Professor Greg Bergida, he brings nearly 20 years of experience in online marketing and higher education leadership. He is currently the Director of Planning, Assessment, and Strategy at Northwestern University, an American university in its Qatar campus. So he's been almost 10 years in Doha, the capital of Qatar in the Middle East, one of the places that will host a World Cup, a FIFA World Cup very soon. So at Northwestern, he leads the graduate and executive education programs, and also as an adjunct professor there, he teaches on media industry, strategic communication, and entrepreneurship. And with his research, he focused on wearable devices and emerging media technology. He began his career managing new product marketing for an electronics component supplier in the United States before moving on to manage web and email marketing for multinational e-commerce companies, later overseeing their businesses intelligence and web analytics. Greg is also a champion for experiential learning and global entrepreneurship, and works to support initiatives to university students with refugee status, for example, through his scholarship program in the United States. He received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Babson College in Massachusetts, the United States, and an MBA from Fordham University in New York. He has also a PhD in international business management from the International School of Management in Paris. He is also the host of Can We Get Coffee podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other places, including on its own website, which I'm very happy to share the link with you very soon on the chat. And he brings together students and young graduates with industry leaders from all around the world. And it is canwegetcoffee.com. Greg, welcome. Welcome to the University of Brasília. Welcome to Brazil. It's our pleasure to listen to you. And please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for that very generous introduction. So as Professor Jackie said, I am originally from the United States. Majority of my education background was in Massachusetts and New York. And we'll get into a little bit more of it later. But Jackie and I happen to know each other because we worked together 2 decades ago at Disney World. And so, as we're talking today about the importance of networking and building a global network of friends and contacts, this conversation, we're able to have it because of this relationship that was built. So, as you just heard, I currently work for a university, but my background prior to that was in business, and my degrees themselves are all business degrees. And so kind of living in both of those worlds puts me in kind of a unique position in that, the professional side and the academic side come together. So my approach to just about everything I do when it comes to conversations with students and with teaching is really taking as practical an approach as I can. And so today when we talk about, the importance of networking, it's really a focus on some of the techniques to be able to effectively do that, because I want you to walk away from this conversation with things that you can start doing immediately this afternoon, to have a bit more confidence in starting to kind of set the foundation for your careers ahead, whatever they might be. And so, building on that, as was said, so I was originally from the United States. I've lived in the Middle East for the past 10 years. I now split my time between Germany and Qatar. And my wife is currently in Singapore. So we're covering a lot of time zones, in our lives these days. And, all of that kind of comes about and kind of shapes the framework for, in many ways, how I see the world. And hopefully I'm able to share some of that with you today. So I guess to start things off, why is networking even important, right? Of course, when you think about it, it's, well, these are people I know, this is how I'll land a job, right? Because that's what you're thinking about. I need to work once I graduate. My parents are wondering what I'm going to do with this degree. I want more money coming in than going out, right? All of these things. And having a strong network helps you to kind of make some headway in that area. Like anything else, think of your networking like advertising. No one's going to buy a product that they don't know anything about. And a network is going to help open some of those doors for you, right? So it's not just who you know, it's who that person also might know. That person is able to potentially speak on your behalf, right? They can champion your progress because they want to be able to potentially themselves hire someone that they know and trust. And the more they get to know you and the work that you've done and the experience that you bring to a table, you become a proven asset, right? They know what you're capable of doing and you're able to accomplish, versus someone who, sure, they got their CV, they interviewed them for maybe 1 hour, maybe some of their colleagues interviewed you as well. So they're making a very big decision based on 2, maybe 3 hours of interaction, probably these days over Zoom. But if you've networked with them and you've gotten to know them over a longer period of time, they know so much more about you and are really able to, have greater confidence in bringing you on board. So as was kind of discussed a little bit earlier, things for you to consider when you start to network and build that network potentially now, where I suspect everyone is joining this call from home. You've been stuck indoors for longer than you'd like. I describe COVID years like dog years. You can't remember really when 2020 actually ended. And all those aspects. So we're now living very much in a virtual world. And while there are constraints to that, there's actually some benefit to it. One, if this wasn't the pandemic, there'd probably be someone else having this conversation with you. I'm sure they'd be great, but it would be someone local. They'd be coming in to see you. And as positive as that is, it's still just, a smaller circle of things. So I think kind of the first thing I want to touch on in living in this virtual world is LinkedIn. And if you're not yet on LinkedIn, you should be. And that is going to kind of present a forum to you that exposes you to millions of people, but helps you to start to kind of grow initial elements of that network. I had sent to Professor Jackie before this a document. It's actually an assignment that I give to my graduate students that would help you in auditing your LinkedIn profile, things to consider, and ways that you can really build and sustain a very strong LinkedIn presence over time. For those of you who are just starting out on something like LinkedIn, and you're probably saying, yeah, well, who do I even know? Start with that immediate circle, family members, right? These could be older siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, within that group, you might be thinking, oh, well, isn't that kind of cheating? No, it's not, right? Because those are some of the initial connections that you make. And those are also people that want to help you succeed and can introduce you to others. Then you kind of look one ring beyond that. Your friends, these could be friends from, past school experiences, things like that. You also have people that you're in school with. These could be the fellow students that are in this room. It's kind of weird saying that. But don't discount faculty and staff, because these are people that have very broad networks, people that have gotten to know you. You have that shared connection that, you're at the University of Brasília together, either as employees or as students. One of the best parts about being a university student is the alumni from that university. So I tell my students, and I get a lot of grief from colleagues, when they look at graduate school, and I speak to my undergrads, and they say, oh, well, I'm looking at Northwestern for graduate school. I tell them not to go there, because it's not that it isn't a great school, it is, but it's still the same alumni days. And so if you do one undergraduate program and a completely different graduate program, that's 2 alumni bases you're able to tap into, right? And people help them succeed, and they want to help you succeed. So that initial group right there, which are at your immediate disposal, by simply hopping on LinkedIn and typing in your university name, there are people that you can start to connect with, right? There's a shared connection. And then as you intern, connect with the other interns and the people that you work for. And then when we start to get re-exposed to the world again, if you go to conferences or other events and you meet people and they give you their business card, right, connect with them. You can very quickly grow a LinkedIn presence and see what people are talking about and what they're sharing. I suspect many of you are still kind of in that phase of but I don't know what I even want yet. And you're at uni, you're taking different classes, and depending on who the professor is or what the assignments are, some things are really pulling you in, and some things you're discovering, oh, I definitely don't want to do this. For me, accounting, no way, never going to happen. All the years of business school, I never want to be an accountant, right? I learned that, which was great. And so within that, though, still cast as wide a net as you can early on to grow that network, because you also never know who those people might know, right? So don't just look at people who are in the industry that you want to be in, right? Network with everybody, have conversations, and learn from different people. The upside is people love to talk about themselves, as I'm sitting here pontificating to you, right? Ask people about themselves and their experience, right? And so they don't necessarily have to be from what you think your industry of interest is. As we've talked about, meeting people during the pandemic, this is hard. Don't get discouraged by that. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think, from that perspective, this isn't the way we're always going to be meeting people. But as we touched upon earlier, these geographic constraints are now breaking down more and more, right? I've had people reach out and say, hey, can we have a Zoom cup of coffee? I've had a lot of Zoom cups of coffee over the past year and a half, right? And being able to network and just have conversations. And I'll have people just over LinkedIn, reaching out to do that. Also because people have more time. I don't know how far your commute might be to school, but for me, it was a good 45 minutes each way. That's an hour and a half a day. Multiply that out by weeks and months. That's a lot of now extra time that I've discovered that I have. And so people will now have greater opportunities, and they're looking to make more and more connections. They will make time for you. Embrace the fact that as a student, people remember being a student and will have a greater level of patience. They will find time for you. And the conversations are going to be awkward. You will feel uncomfortable. You think you bring nothing to the table. Not true, right? And we'll talk a bit more about that. But reach out, have a purpose in reaching out. But understand for the fact that a lot of people remember being students. So the level of patience that we'll have and the desire to connect with you is more than you might realize. I want to shift gears a little bit to kind of what is the goal of all of this. At the end of the day, your name is a brand, and you have control over the value of that brand name. And you have to always consider that. Your name is your brand, and that brand can be tarnished. And so I've talked about LinkedIn, but there are countless other social media platforms that are out there. And yes, they are important. It's how you connect and stay connected with your friends and family. But you have to understand that social media is permanent. Just because you think, oh, well, my account is private. No, it's not. It's only private until someone takes a screenshot. Or, well, my social media has nothing to do with work. It does, because it's how you present yourself to the world. And if you step back and say, well, these are my opinions, this is my private life, it's not fair if they hold that against me. It's not about being fair. It's a company or an institution saying this person's going to be representing us, and we want to make sure that they represent us well. And so if you look back at your social media, even if it was 10 years ago, you might want to kind of go back in time a little bit across your social media and reevaluate what might be there. Not everything ages well. Things can very easily be taken out of context. And what you may have thought was a joke or was intended as a joke at the time might not be taken that way now. And so you want to be careful about what's out there. And when people look you up, what do they see? Because again, that all comes down to who you are and what your brand is. In building your brand, look at creating original content, right? Specifically on LinkedIn. And while it's great to be able to share and comment on what other people have done, part of networking is giving people kind of this inside view into your opinions, your analysis, your take on world events. So an example of this personally, probably about a year or so ago, when a new streaming platform launched in the US, HBO Max, which is part of Warner, I had written a short piece on that, posted on LinkedIn. A couple hours later, my wife calls me and she was like, your post is all over LinkedIn. So yeah, whatever. right? Most of my posts would get maybe 700 views, nothing too exciting. I hop on LinkedIn, it's maybe like 4 hours since I posted, it's like 15,000 views. 24 hours later, I think it topped off at like 65 or 70,000 views. And full conversations were happening in the comment section, which of course is super exciting. So as I'm reading through it, I come across a comment that was made by someone, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That was a great insight. So I messaged the guy and said, up for a cup of coffee. He's based out in Los Angeles, California, and ended up having about an hour-long conversation. He's an entrepreneur. I now sit on the advisory board of his company. I'm currently doing work, with them here in the EU. And it was all because of that post, right? So there's a long ripple effect that could potentially happen in building that network and some of those relationships. And don't get your hopes up, except for like 1 or 2 posts, I'm back down to having like 600 views per post. Kind of the next stage in networking is, of course, sustaining it. I don't know what year all of you are within your programs, but you're probably stepping back now saying, all right, well, if I'm networking to hopefully start my career, well, I've got 2 years until I'm looking for a full-time job. This person is never going to remember who I am. And if you don't help to foster those relationships, right, it's, you have to feed it to keep it going, they will forget you. But I hear this from my students all the time. As Jackie mentioned, I run a program where actually I take students to New York City in the summer, and we meet with all different companies and organizations. And this is what they always say: listen, I'm only going into my 2nd year of school. This person's not going to remember me when I graduate. But over time, if you're able to keep in touch with them, that gives you a 2 or 3 year span where they've gotten to know you. That's going to be far stronger than 3 months of knowing someone. And this is exactly actually what happened to me. So Jackie and I worked together at Disney for 2 summers. The summer before my final year of undergrad, I applied for a job with an e-commerce company, and Disney became the ultimate icebreaker in that interview, right? Because inevitably you're going to be like, so did you know Mickey Mouse? One, obviously I knew Mickey Mouse. And it kind of just broke the ice, took the tension out of the room. And so it started that conversation. And so I worked there for the summer. I'm about to age myself. This was the summer of 2001. So yes, I'm 1,000 years old. And at the end of that summer, we had conversations, and I was going to return over winter break. Fall of 2001, 9/11 happens. The economy in the United States really starts to take a dip. The dot-com boom that we knew from most of my time in undergrad basically collapses. And that guy that I'd worked for was like, listen, we're laying people off. We're not hiring. And so when I graduated that spring, I didn't have a job waiting for me. But I was able to find something else. And as I progressed in my career over the next few years, I was always checking in with him. Hey, I'm working on this project. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm looking to change roles. I'm interviewing at this company. He was a reference for me in my job search. And 5 years later, he reaches out to me. 5 years after I originally interned, I was like, listen, we've got a role that opened up. I think you'd be a good fit. Are you interested in coming back? And so he recruited me to return to that company where I was, I ended up working there for about 3.5 years. And so because of that relationship from, 5 years or so prior, I was able to kind of land that next role that was really a major stepping stone for my career. When I worked for him, that's when I went and got my MBA and other things. So those aspects of kind of helping to grow and develop those relationships, it's continuing to have them grow and build over time. Part of this experience, as I mentioned earlier, that, I hate accounting. The networking, the conversations, the internships, all of that, as great as it is to learn about things that you do like, I actually think it's more valuable to learn about things you don't like. Because if you decide to be an entrepreneur, which I hope many of you do, you need to know what you're not good at. And sometimes what you're not good at is driven by the fact that you hate doing it. And so if you're not a quant person, accounting, finance, analytics, like that's going to be who you're looking for in a startup partner or your first hire. And until you have those conversations and until you meet those people who are doing it, you won't have that pipeline of people that you can say, hey, I have this great idea. I have this prototype, or I'm working with this other person. Would you like to come on board? You need those people in your network. You need the people who bring something to the table that you don't, right? That diversity of thought. And so as a networker, one of the things that you need to be able to do is discover those new people and to be able to make those connections. So some of you might be familiar, there's a professor at the Wharton School at UPenn. His name is Adam Grant. He's written a number of books. He has a phenomenal podcast. And he has this book called Give and Take. And it focuses on the idea of there are kind of three groups of people. There are givers, right, who look to always provide for others, but often run the risk of spreading themselves a bit too thin. And professionally as a networker, if you're a giver, sometimes you can be taken advantage of, and it's easy to grow kind of angry and frustrated by that. On the flip side of that, you have the takers, right? The ones who are always thinking about, what's in it for me. And, it leads to short-term relationships because people will very quickly pick up on the fact that you're a taker, and that will taint your reputation. And then kind of that sweet spot is in the middle. It's the matchers, right? And this is personally what I strive to be. And anytime I meet someone, I'm thinking, who else should this person know? Who else in my network would be good for this person to speak with? And so a great example of this. So one of my students at Northwestern, she is from Brazil, incredibly talented student. She's brilliant. And she was in that summer travel program that I had done, and that's really where I got to know her. And so when I decided to start my podcast, because we could no longer travel, and so I still wanted to bring those industry experts to meet students, I reached out to her and said, hey, I've got this friend of mine. She's in Brazil. She's a brilliant woman. Her name is, Jaqueline, and I think we should interview her for the podcast. And so this student was able to join me as a co-host and get a chance to meet someone who I felt would be valuable to her network, right? And so being able to look at things from the perspective of who should be meeting who, and that's my brand value. Right? That's what I bring, and that's what I am known for. I have a very broad network in Asia, Middle East, Europe, North America. Now, by meeting you, South America. I'm also known for being incredibly selective in references that I give and introductions that I make, right? And I'm very transparent with people. Anytime I tell them no when they ask to be introduced to someone, they'll see someone in my network and be like, oh, so-and-so. Yes, I do. Can you introduce me? I don't really know you that well. Can you maybe send me some things, right? There's a lot that goes into it before I just make an introduction. So people in my network know that if I'm introducing someone to you, they are worth knowing, right? That brand value comes in that selectivity. And I try to let my work speak for itself. It's really important. Stay humble in everything that you do. I know it's hard when you're interviewing for a job. You want to put your best face forward and say, I'm able to do this, this, and this. But do what you can to try and let your work speak for itself. And that's getting back, to full circle to something like LinkedIn. Posting some projects that you're doing, particularly if it's multimedia content. If you spoke at a conference or you interviewed someone, right? Being able to post and promote that so people can see and be like, wow, this is a pretty talented person. I should get to know them. Build your brand in that capacity, and your network is naturally going to grow. And do what you can to make sure to follow up, introduce yourself, and foster those relationships over time. And that's pretty much all I have to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg. Many valuable insights, both from your own experience and real cases that can be applied to others as well. Just following on the comment you left at the end now about your student who is Brazilian. And I had the pleasure to, talk to her in one of her podcast episodes. She's from Rio Grande do Sul. She's actually from Porto Alegre. So Greg introduced me to her. He's a student in Qatar from Brazil. We get together, we do the podcast episode, very nice. But she also, and on the side of her activities in Qatar, she runs an association of Brazilian students internationally. And she was on a task to help Brazilian students get visas more easily throughout the pandemic, because the visa processing and issuing from many countries were absolutely delaying and suspended, and there were a lot of problems for the students. So she sent me a message one day and say, hi, Jackie, it's me here. Would you be able to help us? This association, which I'm part of, I'm a volunteer and such, we are having a little trouble in Europe of getting a few visas issuing for Brazilian students in Europe. Can you help? And I said, listen, I happen to have the cell phone of the manager of the students program in Brazil, based in Brasilia, to Europe. I believe she can help you. So I shared with her because I knew she was serious. She was doing a great job, and she was actually volunteering on behalf of the collective good of the Brazilian students going internationally. So she was able to make that connection, and then she comes back to me and say, thank you so much. It was very helpful. We got halfway through already. So that's exactly what Greg is saying in terms of relationship building and how much that can accelerate your access to wherever you would like to go and plan to go. But there was just a bracket and a real case comment as well. But Greg, you really provided valuable insights, and also for students and professionals looking into the world as opportunities, not just as something far away. And you yourself, as you mentioned, you started with your own work experience and relationship development practices into the international environment, yet while you were at university as an undergraduate student. And that's just to say, when you went for 2 times to Walt Disney World, which is a very international work environment. Was that, going to Disney World while a student for a short-term work experience, was that a deliberate decision of yours? Did you know you would like to build an international career, so you searched for an opportunity in which you would also work and have international experiences? Or did you learn about international perceptions and opportunities while already at Disney World?
And that's a great question, because they kind of went simultaneously. I've always been interested in traveling abroad, but I had never really thought about living abroad. And the college program at Disney really opened my eyes to a much broader world out there, because now there were names and faces and conversations and people to those countries. And so, in addition to you, there's still a couple of people, from those summers, that I'm still in touch with now. And so, yeah, it definitely kind of sparked that idea of something to consider down the road. And so early in my career, you know, the electronic components company, you know, they were a global, you know, multinational organization. And, you know, I worked with them for a couple of years, but, you know, didn't stay long enough with them that there was the opportunity potentially for an assignment abroad. You know, they have an office in the UK and another one in Singapore. But that was something that was on my mind. And so in considering, you know, for the students here, you know, early on in your career, as you're a junior employee, it's hard for an international company, you know, in another country to look at sponsoring you to go there. You know, it's expensive, it's resource intensive. Usually they're going to kind of use that political capital for people in the C-suite. But if you find a multinational company that has a local office, right, or it's a Brazilian company that has offices all over the world, work there, let it be known that you have interest in a global opportunity. They might have leadership rotational programs. They might have the opportunity, you know, some companies call them bubble assignments, where it's, hey, we're going to send you to this country for 3 months, you know, or you're able to do an internal transfer. You know, that's something they might be more willing to do. So look for companies like that. You know, a lot in the energy sector, of course, are in that space, manufacturing. And so if you're looking to work abroad, earn your stripes early on domestically, but find multinational companies that have a presence in your country so that you might be able to do internal movement within that company to take you abroad. I think you'll have greater likelihood in getting that type of sponsorship and support than being hired cold internationally by a company.
Very interesting. And maybe also in that aspect, looking at startups that are locally made, but looking at expanding internationally might offer opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I have a couple of new questions here for Greg, but in the meantime, you please feel free to prepare yours, both in English or in Portuguese, as you like. And then Siegrid and José Márcio and I will have a chat ourselves as well, but please feel free to bring your questions. And Greg, let me ask you something else. Should students and young professionals direct their relationship development efforts towards a specific area or direction? The issue here is if they're not yet confident where to go, is there something they can do to accelerate that decision making, or can they just go towards a direction that it feels appealing to them?
Obviously, if you have particular passion, find a way to work within that passion, right? But not everyone has that understanding early on. I mean, I changed careers. I worked in the corporate space, I worked in e-commerce, and then pivoted, and now I'm in higher education. So understand that your interests are going to change over time. And that's why I said, you know, earlier, talk to as many people as possible, you know, to get an understanding for what they do and why they do it, because you may find that there's some commonality there with areas of interest that you have. And so I think, you know, the more that you can do early on to, you know, understand what you're passionate about and find ways to make a living doing it, all the better. I also think early in your career, finding a mentor, you know, which is a topic that, you know, is a conversation all on its own. But having someone that you can really confide in and bounce ideas off of, and they don't necessarily have to be someone in your industry or the company that you work for, right? It's just someone who just is more experienced than you are and is willing to kind of help share some of that knowledge, and in a safe environment, you know, have you be vulnerable and ask questions that you might think are silly or show immaturity or inexperience, to be able to really talk about things, like that. And, kind of one example of this, and another student of mine, she had done she was a student worker of mine in the innovation lab, and, she expressed interest in immersive technology. And through my network, I was able to, help open some doors. She worked for a gaming company. And maybe about 2 months ago, she came to me. She just graduated, was looking to do work. She's back in Asia. She's Singaporean. And I came across this company, shared it with her. And she's like, yeah, I looked at that company, but they're not really looking for people who do what I do. I said, well, what's the worst that happens? Reach out on LinkedIn to someone who works there, introduce yourself, ask if they're willing to have a conversation about the company. They're not going to turn around and, forward that message to their colleagues being like, look at this fool who thinks that they're worthy of being here. No, worst case scenario, you don't hear back. Well, she ended up messaging the CEO. So way to aim high. And the person reached back out and said, I'd love to see the portfolio of things that you're doing. Send it my way and let's schedule a time for a conversation. Well, 4 weeks later, she's starting work there. She started about a week and a half ago. And so sometimes you just gotta go for it. Yeah.
I totally agree. I could not agree more, Greg, because it happened to me recently. So this was early 2020, beginning of the pandemic. I have this student, a Brazilian student doing his master's degree in Europe. He's actually one of the guests we had talking to us last year. He's Igor. He had graduated from the Federal University of Paraná in Curitiba, got a scholarship and went to Europe for his master's degree in 2 years' time. There is one day he sends a message in my professional mailbox. I was working for the European Union, and he writes, hey, listen, I'm from Curitiba, I've graduated, I'm here doing my master's degree. I have 3 months of internship period that I must follow. I'm a scholar from the European Union. I'm just searching for a free internship as I would like to learn in this period. I said, I wasn't even thinking about it, but look how great. Welcome aboard. Let's have a conversation. Let me see how that can happen. And so that was Igor. He was here with us last year, right, Siegrid? He's actually about to finish his master's degree I think he's in Poland right now. Guess what? He got the job to continue with the team that he had done an internship before within the European Union. So that's exactly how it can happen many times. And I am no longer with the European Union because I'm now with the university and studying and researching and so on. But then he writes me a message and say, listen, I would like to thank you so much because I am now a professional worker. I have been hired as a professional. I'm like, yeah, good.
It's
Igor,
a great
good.
feeling. That is,
Yeah.
when you hear from students like that, that is one of the best feelings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he was very thrilled and he was very happy. He had left Brazil to go and do his master's degree with a scholarship. All of a sudden, he becomes a professional hired by the European Union because he sent a message at one day of his research for internships. Yep. So that's really how it can happen. Very good. On another point, in your perception, where will young professionals, as you work with entrepreneurship and with a very global perspective, where will young professionals most make a difference in constantly changing work environments, both in terms of transformation contributions or areas of expertise?
This comes up quite a bit. And I make the joke, this was probably, I think it was spring of 2020, pre-pandemic. I go into class, I plug my laptop in, and, Chrome was up, and I had to pick a couple things up on Amazon. And at the top, it said, Amazon, customer since, right? And it said customer since 1999. And one of the students saw it and was like, wow, your Amazon account is older than I am. And, it was just funny at that moment where it's like, they can't imagine life without Amazon. They don't remember going to a brick and mortar bookstore. And so, kind of within that framework, there's a generational divide in a lot of areas. But I think technology is one where it's most noticeable, right? My students, adopt technology far faster than, my generation or my parents' generation. And so I think in that capacity, ways that, young professionals now can bring more to the table than they realize is within that capacity, technology and communication. Social media tools that are out there. So, my wife is the CIO for a multinational company, and she'll often ask the interns, what platforms are you on? What are you using? Because it's different from what she had. And she's, she uses that as a way to learn. It's not a term that is, often used, but this idea of reverse mentoring, where, you'll hear about, the director or, C-suite officer, takes on a mentee. What I think is equally, if not more valuable, are those young professionals, their first, 2 to 5 years of work, who are able to share their knowledge upwards. And it means that senior people need to be open to that understanding of there's a generation or two below me that know things that I don't, that are incredibly valuable. And so, in that capacity, being up to date on technology and tools that are out there, that are either in your industry or could be used in your industry, and being a thought leader in that particular area and making that known, again, leveraging something like LinkedIn or bringing it up in meetings, right? That type of thing can help open the eyes of people who are more senior of what new tools are out there that could make them more efficient, that could have them reach a brand new audience, right? All of those types of things. I think that's one area that kind of that younger generation of professionals can bring a lot to the table that might be overlooked.
Very, very good. We already have a few questions here, but just a final comment of yours before we go into the questions is about language skills. How do you see, as you mentioned, you've been here and there, and you live in a country that speaks Arabic, and then your wife is in Singapore. Do you see that impacting on a network building and then on work environments? I mean, must foreigners speak perfect English, perfect French, perfect Spanish before they can start networking and searching for opportunities? Or how do you see it?
Yeah, and this was something that, kind of the unofficial start to the session, we were talking a little bit about. English is the global language for business, right? Just as the US dollar is still the global currency for business. But in my opinion, only speaking English, right, which is the only language that I would consider myself fluent in, I think actually holds me back. Because, and Jackie, you've brought this up in conversations that we've had in the past. Language is more than just communication; it's an understanding of culture. And so as I mentioned, my wife, she, while she works in IT and works in technology, she didn't learn English till she was 14. She's originally from Taiwan, so she speaks Mandarin, she speaks Hokkien, and she speaks English. And then once in a while, she'll still kind of mess up a word or mix up a phrase, that kind of thing. And while she'll sometimes get, I wouldn't say necessarily embarrassed by it, but she realizes, oh yeah, I know that wasn't right. But at the same time, like, she speaks Mandarin. This is an incredibly complex language. Writing wise, it's a pictographic language. There's multiple tones, within it, which can completely change the meaning of a word, right? All those things. So to anyone who would turn around and be like, oh, she said this, but meant that. Yeah, let me know how your Mandarin is, right? good luck with that. And so I think in that capacity, embrace your accent. Honestly, I am more interested and more curious when I have a conversation with someone and I hear, someone else, maybe at the table where they speak and it's clearly English is not their native language. I want to know more about that person, right? So it actually draws me in, relative to the interest in that person, because their background is going to be different than mine. And I want to know more about that. And I also think as industry becomes more and more global, the more that you can bring to the table, specifically linguistically, you add a lot of value. You bring something that I don't. And so to me, don't be shy about your accent. Embrace it, right? It's part of who you are. You should be proud of your identity and where you're from. And, my wife at one point had, there was an article, talking about customer service in India, and they had these schools where, you can speak with an American Southern accent, or an American New England accent, right? All of these different things. And she was visibly disturbed by this, and that aspect of erase who you are, erase an important part of your culture and completely adapt to somebody else. And she was right. She was completely right. So in that capacity, yeah, you're going to spell something wrong. You're going to mispronounce something. You might use the wrong word. But you know what? That's far more impressive than the person like me who can really only speak English. And so don't shy away from your accent. It's part of who you are. It's in your DNA, and that's incredibly powerful and incredibly important. So be proud of it. Wear it with pride.
Great. Very good. Very encouraging. Thanks so much. That encourages us, right, Siegrid, to continue to speak as we do, including.
Much better now with my accent.
Exactly. As we should. Very good. All right. So we do have a couple of questions here, Greg. And maybe this first one, Siegrid, is from Luiara Pamela. And maybe it's for you or Professor José Márcio to help. And she says, is there any available options for internationalization of students at the university now? She says she doesn't know a lot since Science Without Borders ended.
José Márcio, do you want to answer that question or should I? Okay, as the director.
Okay. Well, I would say that you can have a trajectory very close to Greg. It's a deliberate choice. But I would say it's more difficult for us in Brazil than it is for him, because the American universities, most of them are very well internationalized, or they have very good initiatives on that. Especially easier for him because he's from New York, probably the most cosmopolitan city in this planet. And so he had already a long group of contacts in terms of international friends and colleagues, and it was easier for him. For us, it's a bit more difficult. The Brazilian universities are not that much internationalized, and we speak Portuguese, which is a wonderful language. By the way, Greg, I will sleep tonight better because you just mentioned that my accent is fine. I'll just sleep better tonight. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Well, you see, we speak Portuguese, which is a wonderful language. It's a very resourceful and very good for literature and poems, but it's not that. A lot of people speaking Portuguese. It's one of the main language of the world, number 7 or something, but it's not international language. So most of the people that speak Portuguese are in Brazil. So if you are going to have international career, you need to have English and in probably Spanish or Chinese or something else, but you need to do an effort on that. So In the Brazilian university, they have this serious problem. We're not internationalized like American university, or incredibly internationalized like a European university, where you can find friends from many different nationalities and language. So it will be more difficult for you. We have the internal service of the University of Brasília, but you need to have a trajectory similar to Greg. You need to do a deliberate effort to do that. You need to do an extra job in terms of language, and you need to invest more in terms of your develop new skills, cultural skills, language skills, and that's not easy. You have a big advantage when you compare to your colleagues just 2 years ago, because the world is completely different now. Everybody now knows how to use Zoom and or Teams or Google Meet, and that's very helpful. And by the way, we're having a professor from university in Qatar with a career in Germany that have some that came from New York. Well, that will be very difficult for us to have Greg as a guest some 2 years ago, because I had to go to airport and take Greg to the best hotel in Brasilia and pay him some meals in our best restaurants. That will be very expensive, oh my God, and it will be almost impossible to organize. And now we're having this wonderful experience, and he's comfortable in his apartment in Germany. So, it's an effort. It's a big effort that you need to do. All right, that's my comment. And now I have a question, if I can, Jaqueline. Greg,
of course you can, yes.
You managed to have a career in Qatar, which is a very different culture from ours in the West. A different language and different religion, is a different branch of civilization from ours in the West. Was it very difficult? How was the experience there?
I've loved it. I will always consider Qatar a place I would call home. My first visit to the Middle East was in December of 2011, when I was brought over for the final rounds of interviews. So I spent, I guess, 5 days there, and then a month later moved there full time. Now I was, very lucky that I was going to an American university that's there, so everything was going to be in English. Doha is an incredibly cosmopolitan city. You can navigate just fine, only knowing English. But it was a big change from New York City. And so being able to go in, and the biggest thing was having that understanding, that mindset of, this is going to be different. You have a lot to learn. Don't try and just transplant New York to the Middle East. Are there moments of frustration? Absolutely. Were there moments where I thought this was a huge mistake? Of course. But it very quickly became home, because the more that you're able to do to meet people who are not like you, not being only around people who speak English, not only being around Americans in my case, doing more to kind of embrace local culture to the way that you can, made it the experience that it's been. And one of my closest friends, he's Bedouin, which is, kind of the true locals, of the country, and getting to know him and his background, and his family and experience, and going out to the desert to do falconry, things like that, to get a better understanding of this country in which I'm a guest, and experiencing it, and do what you can to embrace local culture as much as you can. Sadly, Americans, the stereotype is that, what do you mean everyone doesn't want to be like us? That's impossible. right? The proverbial ugly American. And being able to go there and just do what I can to embrace other cultures and the local culture there made that experience. Because I truly thought, and my wife will say the same thing, we thought we'd, 2 or 3 years of being there and then head back to America. And we fell in love with it, and the people and the culture and society. And, we learned new things every day because we tried to learn new things every day. We wanted to learn new things every day. And so to me, that was, one of the best parts to being in that part of the world. And it will always be a home to me.
Very interesting. And this thing about falconry, it's absolutely stunning. It's so beautiful. You see the professionals, working with the falcons, and they fly and they come back. Absolutely
it's amazing. It is. Yeah. It still amazes me every time I see it.
Very. Siegrid, you have the next question here. Would you like to voice your question?
No, I just put it here in case there was not enough time, or just to break the ice so the students can also use that communication mean. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Gregory, for your presentation, the insights. And while you were mentioning how to develop and maintain, or the importance of networks for international career possibilities, I just could remember on the importance of reputation. So this is the term that kind of came to my mind, and build up a strong reputation and maintain it long term, to me seems like something not so easy to do, especially when you think long term, and especially when you're younger. I mean, when you're in a career position where you kind of have already a history, a trajectory, you already have a reputation, seems easier to figure out the importance of it for your career. But when you are so young, you kind of don't know how to start, or what is the importance of reputation, or how to avoid networks that may not be counting positively for your reputation. So if you just could give us an advice or some ideas on how to, what is the importance of the reputation, and how to build a strong one, and how to avoid some mistakes on that that can impact your long-term reputation in a career, I would be thankful for that. So that's my question.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, this goes back to that generational element, right? When I first met Jackie, for example, there was no Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram, like that didn't exist. So we could do dumb things and there was no record of it, right? Those days are gone. And so, by the time LinkedIn came around, I mean, I was in Boston the same time that that Zuckerberg was there. So there was some kind of, cross-pollination. There were some people that, that I went to school with that were involved, early in Facebook. So there was knowledge of it. But for the most part, we could grow up and mature without there being this permanent record of it. And now it's harder to have that, because it's not just things that you choose to have be out there, it's the things that those around you choose to have out there. So for example, I don't take photos with alcohol in them. Just a personal preference, and not just because I live in the Middle East where, for the most part that's, considered taboo, but just in general, just my, personal preference. For the most part, I'm only on LinkedIn. I have an Instagram account. I've never posted anything. And if you looked at my Instagram feed, it's pretty much just, friends, family, and a handful of celebrities, right? So, I very carefully curate what my digital footprint looks like. Now, part of it is I have also worked in digital analytics, so I know what gets tracked. It's kind of like, being a chef in a kitchen, not everything comes out perfectly plated, right? So, in that capacity, just be mindful of that. That's why I said early on, social media, digital is permanent. Even if you delete a post, it's not gone. And so just really being mindful of things like that, and also understand that if you're looking in a global perspective, what might be seen as, you know, a quote unquote normal in your local culture, how might that be perceived elsewhere? And it's not saying that you should filter yourself at all times or enact self-censorship. Just be mindful about how things might be perceived. This could be anything from attire to, you know, like I said, alcohol in photos, right? Those types of things. You want to just be mindful of it. But at the same time, this is your life. You know, you're not, you know, creating an artificial version of yourself. It's, again, just being mindful, particularly on places like LinkedIn or Twitter, which are seen as, you know, a bit more on the professional side than, say, a Facebook or an Instagram, which is more, you know, informal. You know, it tends to be a bit more social, you know, on that side of the spectrum. So again, you aren't always able to put things in context. Things can be screenshotted and taken out of context. Just be mindful, you know, of how that might be viewed by others.
Okay, thank you so much.
And we have another question from Lucas. Lucas says, I would like to know, Greg, please, what you think. Of course, he first thank you for the sharing of your experience with us. And he says he would like to know what you think in terms of a best approach for getting in touch with people that you don't know on LinkedIn. Is there any suggestion you would give?
So a couple of things. One, you know, one of the great things about LinkedIn is it will say if the person is potentially like a second or third degree contact, right? So, you know, for example, if there's someone who is the, you know, director of production at a company that you want to potentially work at, or you're applying, or you're considering applying for a job at a particular company, and you look up maybe their vice president of HR or another role, and you say, oh, you know, it says they're a second degree contact. And you're able to click on that person, and it'll tell you who that shared contact is. And, you know, it'll say, oh, it looks like Greg knows Jackie. Message me and say, I don't know how well you know her, but I'm applying for a role at that company. I'd like to talk with someone who works there to get a little bit, you know, of knowledge about, you know, their experience, et cetera. Would you be willing to introduce us? And depending on how well I know that person and how well I know you, I might be willing to make that introduction. You know, or I may say, you know, send me an email that I can forward along, you know, to kind of add that little buffer, that little protection to my contact, so they can then decide if they want to reach back out, and do things that way. But yeah, take a look and see if you have a shared connection, and, you know, ask for an introduction. Again, selectively doing that. You know, again, if you're looking at a specific role at that company or are looking to learn a lot more about it, you know, of reaching out. But understand that some people may say, you know, actually, I don't know them that well, so, you know, I don't think I can help you, and be respectful of that.
Fantastic. Thank you. We do have another question, and it's from Gabriel, and he's saying, what would you say to be one of the greatest learnings from working outside your home country?
Ooh, and I say this as an American, the sun does not rise and set with the United States. When you come from a country like the US, all right, in my case, that's how you perceive a majority of the world, right? It's what you grew up with. It's what you understand. There's a familiarity with it. There's a comfort in it. And so when something diverges from that, it can be a challenge. And so I think being able to kind of leave that bubble of my home country and go elsewhere, and not try to translate everything back to my own experience and judge it based on that, which you subconsciously are going to do, right? It's like any language, right? If you speak multiple languages, you may turn around and hear English, translate it to Portuguese, and then go from Portuguese to Italian. It's going to take a while before you go directly from, language A to language C without translating it through your language B first. So the best thing that you can do is do as much as you can to try and leave your bubble at home, and not look at the rest of the world through that lens, and try to read up and ask questions to understand the context and history behind other countries and their culture and their language and their faith and the people within that, so that you can understand the perspective that they're coming in from. Do a lot more listening than talking. And so to me, moving to the Middle East, which is, I think, one of the most misunderstood regions of the world. When I moved there, people are like, but isn't it war torn? You hear about Syria and Yemen and the humanitarian tragedies that are happening there. And you look at a place like Qatar, which is one of the wealthiest per capita income countries in the world. I mean, it's incredibly different. And I had so much to learn. And I made mistakes early on of trying to look at things through a Western American lens. And I struggled early on because of that. Once I started to let that go and try to just learn about other people without having preconceived notions, was a saving grace for me. And it's changed my entire perspective on life and the world in general.
Very, very, very interesting. So feel free in case you have more questions, but if not, I will just confirm what we have discussed here. As it's a huge pleasure for me to have Greg coming and discussing this with us at the university, because as he mentioned, we've known each other for 2 decades now, sorry, not 2 years, 2 decades. And it all started in Disney World. And ever since I also worked at Disney World twice, right? And within the many colleagues I have had within those long months in America, they were fun, but long, good months. I've kept in contact with 3 of them. Nice contact, quality contact, and Greg is one of them. And just to confirm, the virtual networking is important. That has been most through virtual channels, right, Greg? Except one time we met in New York City, and that has been evolving. And this is to say the networks only can get better and stronger throughout the years. So don't look at things just thinking about tomorrow. Let's consider things looking at the long term as well. And this is all, of course, happening because both he left a good impression in me, I left a good impression in him. And so we can come together, not just for fun stuff and sharing posts about Trump and whatever, but also talking about work. And once again, Greg, thank you so much. And I really look forward to working more with you, which has been great throughout those 2 decades. So Professor Siegrid and Professor José Márcio, I then hand over to you. From the university side. And thanks so much, Greg. Really happy to see this happening.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's really an honor to be, I would say, joining you. Now I know that I could have come to Brazil and gone to nice restaurants.
Yeah,
here I am just doing this over Zoom. I missed out.
It's on José Márcio's card.
Yes, you'll be most welcome, sir. Please come to Brasilia. We'll be very happy to receive you here. It will be great, I'm sure. But I must say thank you very much for Jaqueline, who managed to organize this wonderful seminar and presentation and conducted quite well. Thank you very much, Jaqueline. Great. And I must say also thank you very much to Gregory Bergida for giving this very good presentation, a wonderful presentation, and a real example of an international career and someone that's managing an international career quite well, and also doing in the fashionable way, the new way, which is using the internet, quite clever to do that. And I myself will have a wonderful game. As I mentioned, I'm going to sleep well because I can live better with my thick Brazilian accent from now on. That's very good. So wonderful and wonderful opportunity for us at the University of Brasília. And I hope that you can make it to come here one day. And,
I absolutely will.
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right, it is my pleasure. And as I said, Professor Jackie has the LinkedIn audit assignment that I hope she'll share with the participants as well.
Okay, so I also, on the behalf of the management department, I would like to thank you so much, Gregory Bergida, to be here with us this morning here in Brazil, and thank Jaqueline as well so much, because I think what we are seeing here is exactly how professors are putting their own networks to work in a positive way for our students. So, and I'm sure they are understanding that, and also understanding the importance of starting to think about their career more consciously right now, not just letting things go occasionally in their lives, you know, just imagining like, oh, I will have luck and things will happen for me just by chance. And maybe it's important to see it's not exactly like that. You have to put some effort on that. You have to study language. You have to be a good student, and then you have the professors on your side if they need to write a recommendation letter, for example. And even the professors' networks are available for good students always. So it is, I wished I had someone to tell me that when I was a student, because in my time I was much more, I think I was not so worried about a career. Thankfully, everything worked out fine. I'm pretty happy at where I am right now. But if I had some better advice, maybe things would go smoother. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to think about that and to explore more on that side with our students later and in other classes. And I am together with José Márcio. If it happens for you to come to Brazil, please come to visit us. We will be very happy to have your visit at our university, at our department, and to bring you to a nice restaurant by the lake here in Brasília. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful city. Jaqueline will be also our guest, and I hope we have the chance to do that soon. And belong to a same network for a long time. Inequality Network. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And to all the students, thanks so much. These were fantastic questions. And look me up, connect on LinkedIn. I hope to be able to, hear from you, and, if there's anything that I can, do or answer other questions, you can catch me on there. Consider me a resource for you.
Very nice. Thank you so much. So everyone, I have shared on the chat, and we will share more widely this great inputs from Greg about doing an audit on your LinkedIn. And also at the bottom of the file, you will see there are some links to follow a bit of Greg's works, including his own LinkedIn profile, and an amazing interview he's done with one of the world's largest internet business owner in the world. He's Barry Diller. He's one of the billionaires in the shop, and it's an amazing interview. I really recommend you really do watch, because it's truly interesting, especially from a global perspective, and where does entertainment, where does communication and internet sits, including from here onwards. So you've got it. Thank you.
All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a nice settle down in Germany. Hope Germany welcomes you very well.
It will. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.